Now to access the back area in order to get to the blades and whatnot, we will need to remove this off, and one way to do so is flipping this over and removing these 3 screws that attaches the body. So there are times that some of these screws actually come in different lengths. So it's always important before removing them all is seeing which one's which. Some of them do, some of them don't. But you really don't want to take that risk, because what happens is the screw will just get in the way of the mechanics inside. If you're putting the long screws where it's supposed to be a short screw, and then it will get in the way in the mechanics inside. So far these all look to be about the same size, so I'm not worried about this casing. See if I can just pull it out. There we go. And that just lifts. So this is a 3-blade shutter. And it definitely needs to be cleaned out a little bit. And this is where the aperture blades sit. And you can tell that it needs a little bit of a clean. She's still a little stiff. So these are the 2 screws that we're looking for that will remove this ring off. Alright. We can tackle the shutter first. See if we need to remove. Usually they just pop out from where they are, but I believe, I don't know if this is a different, I believe from what I'm looking at that these actually are some types of latch system, i.e. they could be a screw of some type. So I'm just going to see, because it's a very fine groove right here. So I'm going to see if I can just open them up using this. Alright, so I think I figured it out. Not exactly probably the best option, but definitely something you need to be careful with. I just used one of my smaller 1.2 millimeter flathead. Kind of pushed it against the slide groove and slightly opened it. So, and then just kind of follow definitely first time seeing this implemented, as they usually do sit freely onto the mechanism. And if you have made it this far into the video, I would love to thank you for doing that, as I am trying to build this channel, and hopefully I can show you other repair videos slash also like using the actual cameras that I have in my collection, and going outside and taking pictures and whatnot, and kind of reliving the ways that people used to shoot pre-digital age, and kind of follow the evolution of how photography was. I do have probably close or near the 100 mark of my collection. Some of them common, some of them uncommon. Anything from 127 format to 120 format to 135 format, which is known as the 35mm. Large, medium, styles, a lot of TLRs. So I'm hoping to bring that into fruition in the near future. And by liking, subscribing, and following my channel, that will definitely be made possible. So yeah, just hit that button and hopefully you can join me on my journey. So you can see I'm just applying very gentle pressure, removing the screw off, and then pop in the leaf blade. From its position. As you can notice, one end of, or the bottom end of the leaf blades have a little rivet that sits in grooves that allows it to open and close when the mechanics are working properly. So again, all I'm doing is taking my 1.2mm flathead screw and just applying it gently onto the side of, let's call it a locking screw, a locking mechanism screw, and just kind of guiding it open. You don't want to damage the blades, as I mentioned before. Damaging any part of your camera that is at least 70 to 90 years old, it's going to be hard to get parts, and the only way to get parts is finding another camera that would be used as a part camera. And even then, they are becoming more and more rare. And if things get rare, things get pricey. And obviously you don't want to be going in that route, so just take your time. Don't do anything too crazy. Kind of sit down, listen to your favorite tunes, and just let the time go by. Luckily there's no oil or anything on the blades, but to be on the safe side, we're just going to wipe them with isopropyl alcohol just to kind of get whatever minuscule grime or dirt that's on it. Since you're already this far into opening your shutter, might as well just do a proper cleanup and not regret having to go through this whole process again and reopen everything just, because you decided to do it halfway and that's it. And it's probably for the best to remove this as well, which is the ring that moves the shutter blades. So it's going to be the same concept. It is locked in with this particular screw. So we're going to try the same thing. Hopefully it should be the same. And this should just pop open. There we go. So now we can fully say that we've disassembled the shutter system. So one thing before we start with the aperture, because it'll take some time as well, is we just gets this all cleaned up, put it on the side, and then we can start with the aperture system. Alright, now after we've got everything removed and cleared up, we're going to clean the mechanism with isopropyl alcohol, which you can get at any pharmaceutical store that is near you. So I get a little Tupperware. I don't usually fill it too much, just enough that you can soak some of the parts. In this situation, just about halfway, and just let the gears kind of work its way through it. It's handy to have a bit of Q-tips, maybe an old paintbrush that you could use in order to get in between the nitty-gritty of the mechanisms. So, one thing that we could need to do in order to clean the gears inside the gears here is placing this inside. And this is where I can grab one of my tweezers, pull on the lever here, and then basically move the gears freely by kind of going back and forth, getting all the grime and the dirt off. And you'll definitely need to pull on this lever here. If not, it kind of acts like a locking mechanism for the gears. Usually when everything is all said and done and you have the top shutter ring, this one here, against this lever here, it controls the slow speeds and basically controls how fast each of that speed goes in order to activate the shutter. So by gently kind of holding on to it with a pair of tweezers and with another tweezers or with your flathead, you can go back and forth with your gears, and this way it will allow you to move them together. Kind of take it off and put it on the side. It should allow you to dry off on its own, as the alcohol content is pretty high and strong. So definitely do this in a very well ventilated area, as it does leave quite a bit of a smell. At one point it could be very nauseating for some people. So with the Q-tip, I'm just going around and cleaning any of the dust, dirt, grime, any old oils or grease that need to be used, which we'll explain in a bit later. Certain things that you could use and could not use in order to lubricate your mechanism. Again, be very thorough with your clean. And kind of let it air dry once you're kind of done. A lot of this black stuff that you see is graphite powder. That is a type of lubricant that allows for free movement of the rings and whatnot. You will be going through quite a bit of Q-tips, cotton swabs, when you're doing such cleans with these mechanisms. There we go. Next, we're going to grab the leaf shutters, or the leaf blades, and we're going to apply the same tactic. So we're just going to grab a Q-tip, kind of dip it in it, and you could use the minimum of you touching those blades, the better, because you don't want the grease from your hands to transfer onto the blades. Just kind of give it a quick cleanup. Again, these leaves can be very brittle depending on their condition. You really don't want to be applying too much pressure, having a risk of bending them, or even worst case scenario, breaking them. I know there's a lot of very talented technicians out there that are trying or have actually figured out a way to create these shutters, or these blades I should say, because some of the cameras that they get in order to fix end up having broken blades or rusted blades. And so the minimum that you have to do, the better, I say. So take your time. Clean it thoroughly. Like I said, the high alcohol content will pretty much dry on its own by vibrating. And this way it will help release any dirt and grime that's on the blades. So be nice and clean. There will be some kind of tarnish or even possible scratches, but that is very typical of these blades, especially with their age. So as long as they're kind of flat, not any rust, you're usually in good hands when it comes to it. And then we'll get this one cleaned up as well. And like I said, there's a lot of old graphite that just kind of sits in there. So just take your time, clean it out. It'll eventually air dry on its own. Pieces like these that held the ring at the back, or the washers that pretty much sit in between the camera body and the lens, they'll usually have very stick-on glue on the thing. So in this case I'll just dump it in here, kind of let it soak in. And again, if you have any concerns or questions, don't hesitate in asking. If I'm doing something that you believe I'm doing something wrong, or I'm providing with the wrong information, by all means, you can leave a comment below. We don't learn from each other if we don't really say anything about it. Knowledge is only good if we kind of go back and forth and expanding on the knowledge that we normally have. I kind of started working on my own cameras after my collection started getting big, and I figured that I'm a usually very hands-on person, would love to understand how things really work. That's how I kind of got started. Kind of watched a few tutorials, joined a couple of groups. There's a lot of helpful people out there that are willing to teach people who are willing to learn and do this research. So by all means, this is something that I've kind of started doing for about a year or so, getting to understand how the camera works. And it's quite amazing the level of engineering that went into making these cameras. The amount of springs, the gears, absolutely amazing and fascinating. So definitely, share your experiences. Let everybody kind of see how things are done. Take some of the false information out there and make sure we're correcting others, and being very adamant to keep film photography going as long as it could. I know it has picked up very recently for the last few good amount of years. It's getting a comeback more and more, and it's definitely nice to see that people have options to shoot with. Now, I do digital myself. That's how I kind of started, and I kind of delved into buying film gear, and when I realized that I could still buy film, and that's how my kind of collection started going. There's times when you're cleaning these, they'll be tarnished. This is basically from usage, and you can't really clean these out as much as you can, and you really don't want to buff it out and use any kind of power tools and whatnot, because these are definitely been designed to fit everything in exact way that they were meant to be designed. And if you decide to even shave off even a millimeter by using power tools, or to kind of grind it to make it nice and polished, definitely not worth the effort in order to make it look pretty when you've basically destroyed its functionality. I'm just going to clean this one as well. All right. before I forget, definitely want to clean each part that we've taken from the shutter. And clean those out as much as possible. Again, being careful with handling them and maybe in the future I would mind invest in a jeweler cleaner, an ultrasonic bath of some sort, to really get a lot of the dirt and grime from the very fine areas. But it's definitely not a necessity, as you could see once everything is put together. You could pretty much get everything done and cleaned and proper. A lot of these pieces don't have anything in a sense of oils that would be required to be cleaning, but again, it doesn't hurt to kind of give them a good clean, a good wipe. This way you're making sure that you're starting with every piece that's nice and clean. When it comes down to operating this. And when we do put this together, the shutter system does not require any kind of lubrication, as you don't want anything oil-based touching these gears, as it will cause a lot of problems in either the immediate future or near future. And this is when we get into eventually the lubrication part. A lot of people always say, you know, you can do this or you can do that in order to get the things moving, and at the end of the day, it will do more damage than good. And sometimes, if you're a beginner like I am, or semi-beginner, and you end up needing to have it really cleaned up by a professional that could charge you their worth. And I've known a lot of technicians who will charge more if you attempted to do things that you shouldn't be doing, which, you know, at the same day, I won't blame them for it, because it just means more work for them to clean up oils and grease that should not have been in there. Alright, once things are cleaned up, you've kind of let them air dry, we can put things back together. Now, one thing I've used, and I've used successful, is this particular product from Hobby Lube. It's basically a dry white lube, which is a powder, and it's used for, you know, a lot of RC, railroad, if you're into trains, a lot of gear, non-gear. It is from Woodland Scenics, by the way. I've used it a lot. I can apply it by using a old paintbrush that I have sitting around, and it does the job for areas that you can't use any kind of oil or grease in order to get certain parts moving. So one of the things you can use is, you know, just a cover of a Tupperware, plastic, wherever you have a place to put them, and you just kind of shake it, apply it, and it really doesn't take much to get it going. So I'm just going to put this much for now, because it's always easier to put more than to try to put it back into a tiny tube like this. So and like I said, I've used, you know, old paintbrushes that I can apply it and have more control of where I'm putting it. So starting with the leaf blades, you know, just gonna put a little bit on the brush and on the area that the gears are going in. And just follow the two little rods to the holes that's required to function it. Just apply just a little bit, not too much. Making sure that you're putting it below this tab in order to move it. Just check for basic movement. If it moves smoothly, as it should, and then would reapply the screws that needs to go in here. And when you're screwing things this small, always make sure to kind of hand thread it into position. Before tightening it using a tool. That's the first one. And that's the second one. And then I'll use the same flathead screw that I used and kind of hand tighten it the best I could. Alright. As mentioned before, you're going to have the indents of the rivets for the blades sitting outwards. That goes face down, and that will go onto the groove. And it should sit nicely and flat, and just kind of line it. And it's best to work with one blade at a time, especially in a situation where you do have a screw. In other situations, they all kind of sit on top of each other. They have their own little grooves and whatnot, and you carefully kind of put the outer case on top of it in order to kind of keep everything going. So again, kind of hand tighten it. Make sure you follow the threads. You don't want to be cross-threading. And will definitely require quite a bit of patience, especially when you don't have the proper tools per se to put this in its place. One of the many joys when you're working with very intricate parts and screws. Kind of repeat the same process for all of these. And as blades go, they're pretty quite straightforward by just overlapping them on top of each other. This is why it's important to do it one layer at a time. And it seemed that we've not necessarily screwed up, but recall when I mentioned that certain screws tend to have different length. Well, in this one we found out there's a tiny one, and I'll just have to go back to one of the videos and make sure that I'm putting them in the right place, as unfortunately sometimes a certain length can get into the way of the mechanics. So sometimes you could tell right away which one it is, and sometimes it's kind of difficult to find out which one it is. Alright. Alrighty, so that was quick, and as I mentioned before, this is why sometimes recording and or taking pictures of what you're doing every step could assist with where things are. Luckily, the smaller one that has the smaller threading actually goes in here, and the only reason I was able to find that is it's the only one that's kind of polished compared to the other ones that are kind of a bit more tarnished and darkened. So that was a quick, easy fix per se. I had a situation one time where I was taking one, didn't realize it was short, and sadly enough, it took me quite a couple of tries to figure out. And when you want to try it, that means you have to kind of put everything together, see where everything goes, try cocking the shutter. If it doesn't work, or if something seems to be stuck onto it, you know you got them in the wrong place, take everything out, and then basically play musical chairs, and just more time consuming than it needs to be. So it's always a good thing to record these moments. And again, all I'm doing is kind of threading them in, and making sure that I'm putting them on nice and tight, or at least tight enough by hand. And I'm putting in the last one. Let's call this a learning experience altogether, because that's how most of us, or some of us, learn when it comes to these situations. And then all I'm going to do is tighten them in, as much as best I could using see if I can able to hold the lever down while I'm doing this. Most important thing as well is making sure that the blades do sit one on top of each other the way that you saw them, because that would create for a smoother transition when the blades are closing in and out when they're being fired. And again, this is a little bit tougher, but with a little bit of patience, you should be able to get them in there nice and snug and tight. What will generally happen if you don't is it won't sit, when you put all the casings together, it won't sit as nice as it should. Alright, we can just test it here. And we have no issues. Perfect.